we're talking to you from our little studio in London, in Edgware Road, which is the west side of London.
By little, we mean really little.
Really small. No more than 2 people can be squashed into this room.
Well, fortunately, for my purposes, you have to be kind of tight anyway, so you both fit in on the Skype screen here. But I know
yeah, exactly. Perfect.
I know that neither of you grew up in London. So what brought you both there?
You go first.
Okay. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and I came over to London to do an MA in political philosophy at the LSE. And I hated London when I first moved here, but it's grown on me.
So now you love it.
Yeah, and I love it. And I've been here 15 years now.
And I grew up just north of Copenhagen and living in Copenhagen some of the time as well, in Denmark. And I came over in between studies just to learn English better and did the classic Danish girl thing of falling in love with an Englishman and then trying to go back to Denmark but loving London and the man too much and having to return again. And I've been here about 16 years.
All right, so a nice love story. And
I've got a love story in there too.
And another love story is the connection that you guys made. How did the two of you meet up?
Oh, we met through our kids, really. We met through our kids going to the same nursery, our oldest, about 6 years ago, and bonding through our love of colours, as you can see, the orange colours.
So, yeah, it was a nursery where there were a lot of parents who didn't really look like us, or rather we didn't look like a lot of the other parents. So we were drawn to each other like a magnet.
Certainly very colorful personalities. You can just see it in even the still photos of the two of you. That certainly extends to visual editions as well. Tell me what Visual Editions is and why the two of you wanted to create it.
So I guess the starting point for Visual Editions is our strapline, which is Great Looking Stories. And the idea with that is to publish books that only have what we call visual writing. And the idea of visual writing is, I mean, it's a kind of catch-all phrase. It's a phrase that we made up, but it's got a really rich literary lineage and history. And it's writing that uses visual elements as a way of telling the story. So these visual devices or elements are kind of embedded in the storytelling, and the story would be something completely different without them.
So we have a passion for books, but more than anything, we have a passion for giving people creative new experiences. So all our books are bound together, as Hannah said, by visual writing, but what that gives people in terms of experiences is a different way of reading and using books.
In this world of the ebook becoming more and more popular, why are you confident about your own survival?
Well, of course it's a risk, but you know, anything's
new,
a risk.
Yeah.
Anything new is a risk. Everybody asks us this question.
And lots of people tell us that we are insane.
Yeah. which is probably true. But I guess the thing that we always come back to is the way that we kind of function as people today isn't that, you've got kind of physical objects on the one hand and then you've got a kind of screen-based life on the other hand. Those two lives are constantly integrated into each other and feed in and out of each other. So it seems really kind of artificial to say that, ebooks are just wiping out the need for physical cultural objects. And we think that there's a different way that we can think about those objects as well, that it doesn't have to be, about printing really cheap, disposable paperbacks that are available for 3 for 2s in supermarkets. There are different ways of thinking about what that kind of physical experience can be, just like there are different ways of thinking about what that kind of experience can be online as well.
It's almost, we think about it as a huge opportunity as opposed to a threat, the sort of current climate within the publishing world. Because rather than thinking about how do we save the sacred paper book as it was, it's much more thinking about what are the boundaries we can push and where can we take books to. I mean, there's no doubt that if you want to create a book that's in printed form, you've got to think well and hard about why you're doing it, because there's environmental reasons, there's lots of technological reasons to why would you create physical objects. So it's got to be something that gives people something special they couldn't otherwise have. And that for us is something really exciting. because that forces us to push boundaries in everything from the narrative to the visual to the print production to distribution to even payment, kind of how you talk about the books and get them out there and get them publicized. The whole thing is different to what it used to be, and we see that as something very exciting as opposed to something very scary.
Mm-hmm. Now, I discovered the two of you. I was looking up Jonathan Safran Foer, who's someone who I would love to interview for my site. And in looking him up, came across Tree of Codes, and then I found those really cool series of videos that are posted on YouTube of people looking at Tree of Codes.
Wow. Nice, messed up.
That's very interesting.
Actually, it's kind of amazing. It's amazing.
It's awesome. Read it.
The way that I explain this to people who have not seen it, and I've been sending the video out like crazy to people to check out, but I really say that it's a work of art. Just talk to me about specifically Tree of Codes, how it's created, but even before that, how you hooked up with Jonathan Safran Foer on this project.
So we hooked up with Jonathan because we thought of all the contemporary writers out there, he's probably the one that's one of the experts in his field in terms of using visual mechanics as part of storytelling. And Anna had interviewed him, or tried to interview him for an article she wrote a few years back quite 4 or 5 years back now, all about the visual techniques that he used in his last big bestseller. So we literally wrote to him and told him about our ambition as a business and told him about our desire to create stories that used other art forms than just the narrative as part of the storytelling, and asked him whether he would want to be part of it and whether we could convince him to work with us. And it really was an email we called the love letter, telling him how much we admired him and finding out whether he'd be up for doing something differently outside his existing publishing relationships. And he said yes. And that was really how it started. He already had a love of the idea of doing something with die cuts. So it was about finding out what would that something be and how could you make sure that the narrative still had a role. So it was still very much a Jonathan Safran Foer book that had that fantastic writing as part of it, not just an object to look at.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the public response to the book.
It's been pretty amazing.
I think we had talked about the book and talked about the ideas behind the book and talked about our ambitions for the book, our collective ambitions for the book. So when I say our, I mean Britt and I, Jonathan, Sarah DeBont, who designed the inside of the book, and the printers as well, who are a huge part of the story. And we talked about it for so long. And had a really clear idea of what we wanted to do, but what we didn't have a clear idea about was how people would respond to it. So we really had no idea what to expect, and it definitely, I think I can say hand on heart that it exceeded our expectations. That we sold out of the first print run in 6 weeks. It was the media really embraced this as a new way of reading, as a new way of writing. We've had a couple really funny emails of people asking how to read the book. They get it and they're like, oh my God, it's really beautiful, la la la, and love it, but now what? What do I do with it? And there's something lovely about kind of having conversations about how you read something.
Some of the initial critiques we actually got were from the whole design community, which was incredibly positive. But we didn't really know how the literary circles would react to it as a piece of writing. So I think getting their sort of thumbs up, them being excited by it, a large majority, has been really fantastic because, as we said, it needs to be visual writing. It's not just a visual object. It needs to be something that makes sense and is enjoyable narratively as well. Mm-hmm. But what's been really exciting is the whole digital communities of people who have gone really into the book in particular, but also the journey behind it. So the production process, how long it takes, kind of us telling as part of the story, instant early reactions, and then sharing people's later reactions. So the whole online community and actually engaging with people and having some ongoing dialogue has been something that's been absolutely brilliant, really, really wonderful experience.
Of course, Tree of Codes is not the only book that Visual Editions has put out. I wanted to ask you briefly about Tristram Shandy, which received some design recognition in its own right. It was in a museum show, correct? Or am I...
Yes.
Okay.
It still is. It was a book we wanted to put out before Jonathan's because it's the one that really lays the foundation for what visual writing is. It's a very old classic from 18th century, but it's just revolutionary and still really relevant because it's so mad about how placed with narrative structure or lack of narrative structure in a book form. So we brought it out as a book that younger audience still bother looking at. So the brief to the design agency was really make this book visually relevant again and make it something that a younger audience can cherish as well as the older audience who already know about this classic. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't really expect it to do that much. Very, very small print run, really just kind of testing the grounds and kind of laying out foundations as a business. But then it's done incredibly well and got picked up to be part of the London Design Museum's annual Best of 2010 Awards. So it's in the Design Museum at the moment, and it's kind of sitting right next to
the iPad,
the iPad and Angry Birds apps and the London Mayor's biking scheme. So it's kind of insane.
Yeah,
this lovely old classic sitting in something very new and modern and contemporary.
Tristram Shandy, Tree of Codes, revolutionary each in their own right. What are you working on now? Are you at liberty to tell me?
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to tell you.
Please do.
So what we're doing is we are reissuing a book that was first published in the 60s called Composition Number 1. And it was written in French and it went out of print really quickly. And it's what we call a book in a box. So it's literally a book that comes in a box, and you open the box up, and inside there are a collection of loose pages. So the whole idea is that the reader chooses whatever order they want to read the book in, and they can read it infinitely. They can just keep reading it on and on, or kind of stop and start again and keep kind of changing the order of things. And it's an incredibly relevant way, or kind of contemporary way of reading, because it's nonlinear. So it's something that we're actually really used to doing on the screen, but maybe not so used to doing with, in the physical form. That's coming out in May.
Mm-hmm. And then we've got two new authors that we're working on as well. So one is Shona Mackay, who's a pretty fresh author. She's quite established as an animator and illustrator, but not yet as a writer. So we're working with her on a collection of short stories, which we kind of talk about as being children's stories gone wrong, so very, very dark, short tales. And that's very exciting. And that should be out later this year, hopefully. And then we've also just signed a contract, or pretty much signed. Ink is still wet, so we can't quite talk about who that is yet.
Okay.
But that's
a writer that we're really excited about. We have to keep our mouths closed a little bit longer on that one.
Yeah,
but we'll tell you all about it soon.
Yeah.
No matter how you package it, you're working with the written word, and you're helping to maybe give a little sneak peek into what the future of the written word is going to look like. But in your own minds, what does the future hold for the written word?
It's just about kind of, using what we have. We have all this amazing technology. We have all these amazing talents, and seeing what's possible, and having a bit of fun along the way too.
And also think about it in the broader sense of storytelling, because storytelling will never, I don't think, ever go away. But it's kind of how that storytelling is put across will definitely change. And I think what we always think about is that anyone who says they know what's going to happen in the future is probably lying, or they, some hold a spirit that we're not. But what we can all see is that there are huge amounts of opportunities out there. And I think generally what we feel is, rather than being really scared of what's being closed down, we should all be really excited about what's actually opening up.